3, 4.
Hey father, hey son, making a podcast sure sounds fun. Set up the mics, grab a cup of joe, and let's see how it goes.
Hey there, welcome to We Were Thinking. My name is Matt, and I'm sitting here with my dad, Steve. And today we wanted to talk about marriage, but the way we're going to talk about it is a little kind of sideways, where it's going to sound like a parenting episode, but it's really a marriage episode. And today we're going to be talking about how kids are important. They are very important, but they're not the most important part of your marriage relationship. And
Okay,
so that's where we're headed.
before you even decide to hang up, if you're a parent, we're not here to say don't take care of your children. We're not here saying that you're a bad parent or anything like that. What we really want to talk about is some of the observations that we've both had about marriages, especially when it comes to our children. I think culturally, and we're going to get into some of these things in just a few minutes, but I think culturally, somewhere along the way, we have allowed our children to become the authority, even in our marriage relationship. I'm not talking about discipline at this point. I'm just talking about, as we've said before, or I think we've said before, where that, when you ask, your children what they want for dinner, they're the ones who's going to set the menu. Or you ask your children, what are we doing today? Wait a minute, they're not the chairman of the board. You're still the parents. And in your marriage, if you're not careful, if you give your children the chairman of the board status, what's going to happen is that the other board members, that is the husband and the wife, the marriage is in trouble, because one day that person that's the chairman of the board may not be there, or if they aren't there, who are these other two board members, the husband and the wife, looking at each other across the table?
That's right. So the kind of inspiration for this one was a conversation Dad and I had, and I know I've said it on here before, but this is where this came out of. I was 16 years old and asked Dad. I said, "Okay, what are we doing for dinner tonight?" And his response was, "Well, I don't know what you're doing for dinner tonight, but your mother and I are going out on a date." And the whole idea was that I'm not going to be in the home forever. There's going to come a time where I am not living at the house, and Dad made sure that I knew that that was the case. There's a time you don't live here anymore.
That's right. You are leaving home. Parents, it is our job to raise our children up to leave home. And now that I am retired, to please pay into the Social Security system, would you? That's what we want you to do. I want you to leave home and go out and pay into the system.
That's exactly right. So, but Dad looked at me and he said, "Look, I'm going to date my wife, because the truth of the matter is that I have seen so many people I've known personally, people that I've heard about, or people whose parents this happened to, where the parents get divorced after 20 years or 25. Or 30 or 35 years. You've been married all this time, and all of a sudden you get a divorce. And a lot of the times the reason is because we poured so much into our children. What happens a lot of times is we focus on our children so much. And let's face it, there's a lot to focus on. The younger your kids are, they take a lot of time. It takes so much when you've got, I talk to new parents, and it's like, how are you? And the response is always, "Okay, we got 4 hours of sleep in a row last night," And then you got the toddlers. We're like, "Well, how are you?" They're like, "We just wait until that afternoon nap time, and that's my time to breathe and whatever." So being a parent takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. But on top of that, you're always going to be busy. You can always say, "Oh, well, we're going to get to this point and we're not busy anymore," or "We're going to get to that point and we're not busy anymore." There's never a time you're not busy.
Well, it's interesting. I saw a cartoon years ago. I think it was called The Family Circus. And in the cartoon, it showed the mom and the dad. The kids are running everywhere. The children are doing this. Everything is, the toys are laying out. The house is a wreck. And the mom or the dad says to the mom, said, "When will all these things be put away?" And then the next photograph shows them as older parents, grandparents, standing in the attic with all the toys stacked in the corner with cobwebs on them, and it got there a whole lot quicker than they thought they would. What you're going through right now is a stage, but here's the problem. If you invest all your time in your kids, I'm not saying don't invest in your children, but I'm saying that there are other people in the home When we invest all of our time in our children, then as a husband and wife, we could be in trouble. Just talking about what you said just a moment ago, we got 4 hours of sleep at one time last night, or we're waiting for the child to go to sleep so we can get a rest. Well, that means that all those other times, they are doing everything they can through work, through the family, through the environment they're in, that they're not investing in each other because they're just tying a knot at the end of the rope they're on to try to hang on. And you still have to invest in your marriage. If you don't invest in your marriage, then you don't get the dividends of having a long, productive, and quality marriage.
That's right. You have to invest, and it's going to the thing about investing in your marriage is going to take two things. Same thing when you invest in anything: time and money. And I know everybody's like, well, I don't have time and I don't have money, so I guess I can't invest in my marriage. No. Everybody has time. And the money, when I'm saying that, I'm not saying it's got to be super extravagant. It's not, oh, it has to be fine dining. Oh, it has to be dinner and a movie. Oh, it has to be. It could literally be $3 to park your car at a state park and spend the entire day hiking or whatever. That's $3 in gas.
Well, it's interesting, Matt. It was just this last week, matter of fact, and I'll share this, that your mom and I were doing some things around the house. It was the time that we had and everything. The leaves were on the trees. They're looking very nice. We know a rain is coming, so all the leaves are probably going to be dropping off. And it was in the afternoon, and your mom said, let's just go out and see the leaves. Okay, great. So we go out and drive for about an hour and a half, just the two of us. We're spending time together and look in the truck, and lo and behold, I have 2 coupons for free ice cream at a local establishment. So we pull up and we see some former workmates that I had that have been retired now for 3 or 4 months. And so it's like, okay, so we grab our ice cream, we sit down, we talk with those folks for 30 minutes or so. We eat, we've had a great day together. And honestly, when we got back, it was one of those, because we've been so busy with so many things, but we had to spend that time to invest in each other, because I'm not in this for just now. I'm in this for the long haul. And even as a young couple, if the child's asleep or they finally have laid down or you finally got a moment, we always say the same thing. I finally have a moment to myself. Yeah. Take those myself moments and invest in your spouse. And it could be, honestly, you may both sit on the sofa, put your head on your shoulder, hold hands, and both of you fall asleep. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
You know, let me ask you this. When was it when you were, when we were growing up and, Krista, my sister, and I, we were, kids, teenagers, whatever. When was the moment that you looked at mom and you said, okay, whether out loud to her or just in your heart, you're thinking, okay, I want to make sure that I'm investing this. Was this something that you thought, day one, because you guys got married and kids came, immediately?
Yeah, we had a 2-week-old on our first anniversary. And for those folks that like to do math about how long the gestational period is for a human being, it all lines up.
They made it.
It was all right. It was after marriage. Get off me, okay? But here's the thing. We had kids early, so we never really spent some of that quality time together because we were like everybody else. Man, we hit the ground running, and then 2.5, 3 years later, Matt shows up, so now we have 2. And I really thought about it when I started seeing some of my friends, some people that I'd worked with that had been married for 20 years. Their child had gone off to college at age 18. And for the last 2 years of their marriage, they started struggling because they'd always taken them, their child to the ball game. They'd always taken them to practice. They was always going to the games. They were always going to band events or sports, whatever. So they're always tied up in their children. Well, then the children were gone. And honestly, they could almost look at each other across the table and go, I don't know who you are. Yeah. And you don't know me. And I just made the decision. I guess you were probably about a freshman, sophomore, because you're getting ready to drive, so you're gone a lot. And I just made a decision at that point forward that I am not going to be one of those statistics. I want to make sure that we reinvest in each other and spend some quality time together. And honestly, frozen pizza went up a lot in our house during that time, if you remember.
Oh, I do remember. That was my dinner a lot.
Yeah, that was his dinner, because it's like, your mom and I are going to go out on a date. And he said, when are you coming home? I'm like, when we get home. And we would go out. We might grab a meal. We very seldom went to the movies because that's just watching a movie together. But whatever she enjoyed doing, I'd like to go for a ride in the afternoon, the evening with her, or take her out to her favorite place to eat, or to grab a dessert somewhere, or honestly just go for a walk just so that we could talk and spend some time together. I just believe that we needed to reinvest in our marriage. And at that point, that would have been 20 years of marriage. And I wanted to make sure at 20 years of marriage that we were looking at 25, 30, 40, and now 46 plus years of marriage. And here's the thing, if you're married right now and you're listening to this and you have children at home and you're thinking, when will it ever get better? Everything is just a stage. When they are little and they're not sleeping, they will. If they're the terrible twos and they're toddlers, it'll change. And then you're going to get into middle school and you're going to think, man, I wish I had a toddler. And then when they get in high school and it's different. And then when they become in college years, it's totally different because now you're the parents of young adults. So don't be looking for and waiting for that next stage. Enjoy the stage you're in. But in that stage, here's my plea and here's my choice, or here's my statement, I guess. Don't spend all your time investing in your children that you forget to invest in your marriage.
Yes.
You still got to spend time with the one that you stood up and made vows to God in front of witnesses till death do us part. And you got to make sure that you maintain that relationship with your spouse.
You're exactly right. And something that I always share with parents as their kids age. Now, I'm not an expert as far as past the stage that I'm at. Right now, I have one in middle school, one in high school. Next year I'll have two in high school. And so I'm still in the midst of this teenage phase, and I'm still learning as I'm going. And it's one of the things that's really interesting is that I think I saw somewhere one time they said the great lie of adulthood is that nobody's got it figured out. Everybody thinks everybody else has it figured out, and they're like, oh, they're so put together and they've got it all. But I just still feel like a kid that's figuring this out. So does everybody else. It doesn't matter how old you are, your brain, you still feel like you're, a teenager or your 20s or whatever, but your body is the issue. But one thing I've told to parents of smaller children, I saw a lady one time, she was holding a newborn, and I just told her, I said, I know everybody has said to you, enjoy this, it'll pass. You'll never get this time back. I was like, that's not an encouragement. I said, let me encourage you. I want you to know that every stage that my children have been in has been my favorite. When they were 4 and 5 years old and they're riding on my shoulders at the Christmas parade. Oh, I loved that. Now they're in their teen years and we're driving, music's off, and we are joking and laughing, and they're telling me about their day and I love that. Every stage has been my favorite stage. So don't wish away the time and find the positive in the moment when it comes to your children. But as Dad said, at each stage, there are different ways that you can invest in your marriage. Now, maybe each family is unique. Each family is different. Sometimes, like with Jackie and I, my wife and I, we've lived our entire marriage relationship away from my mom and dad and her mom and dad. We've not lived in the same town. So a lot of people, they're like, oh man, we get a date night 3 nights a week. We just drop the kids off at the parents' house or whatever. Well, we didn't have that. So we had to be creative. We couldn't always afford to get a babysitter or had time to find a babysitter or knew somebody we could trust. So we had to be very creative. And it was when the kids went to bed, that was our time together. Or if the kids had an event or a friend's house they were staying at. Now our kids are old enough that we can go on our own and they can stay home, or they'll be at an event. For us, every Friday night, both of our kids have classes that they go to, for dance and theater and stuff like that. That's our time. We got about 2.5, 3 hours every Friday night, and we look forward to Friday night because we're going to be investing in our relationship together. We don't always go out to eat. Sometimes we just go to stores and buy nothing, but we're together and we're joking and we're laughing and we're investing in our relationship with each other. And so at each stage, you're going to find what happens, what is great for you in each stage. Because like I said, you may not be able to leave. You may not be able to go out. Investing in your marriage is not always going out on date night to an event. You know what I mean? So one of the scriptures that I wanted to share that really brings out is Proverbs chapter 5, verse 18. And it says, rejoice in the wife of your youth. And I thought this was funny. The thought came to my mind. This does not mean to rejoice in her when she's in her youth.
Right.
But rejoice in the same woman you married when you were in your youth.
Yeah, and I can tell you, it's just the same thing about every stage with your children. Is one of my favorite stages. Every time that we do this, I enjoyed this, I enjoyed this age, I enjoyed the other. After 40 plus years of marriage, there's different seasons of life. We're now in those retirement years, and it's a different thing because we're doing some things that we couldn't do before, not just because we had children, but because of work responsibilities. Of course, I was in the ministry, so that means Sunday through every Sunday I'm on call 24 hours a day, and I've got all these things going on. I have youth events, I have church responsibilities. Your mom worked at a campus ministry. Well, she had responsibilities and things she had to do, and I would be off on a certain evening, and she had some responsibilities, or she wanted me to go to an event with her where I had been up since 4:30 in the morning, and let's be honest, I didn't feel like going. But so now we're in this different stage in our life. We're still trying to figure out some things, but every stage has been a new chapter, a whole new adventure. And if I look at every one of those as a new adventure, they can be scary because it's something new, but also we're doing this together. And when you do things together, I think what that does is that gives your marriage better strength and some stability because you did this together. If you succeed together, we rejoice. If we fail together, we figure out where we messed up. But you do these things together. And when you have children at home, you have to be so careful not to let them to usurp that opportunity you have with each other as a husband and wife. Tony Evans, famed speaker, author, preacher, he said for a long time, he said, of course, these are children. They're bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh. That's good. That's wonderful. But you made a vow before God and witnesses that you was going to be with your spouse. I'm going to be with my wife until death do us part. Forsaking all others, she is number one. And when it comes down to it, men especially, let me just tell you this, when it comes down to it, your wife has got to be number one in your life. Mm-hmm. She needs to be the queen of the home. You can be the king of the castle. That's okay. But I'm just telling you, she is the queen, and you really need to give her honor and respect. And when it comes down to a discussion, a very heated discussion between your children and your spouse, mm-hmm. you have to come down on the side of your wife or your spouse. If you both are wrong, that's fine. Own it and go on from there. But you've got to make sure you invest in your spouse. One of the things that I've said for a long period of time is that a house is a house, but my wife makes it a home. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who lost his wife a couple of years ago. Nice house, nice home, big house, and he still has a big house, but it's not a home because she really is the one who made it a home. Yeah. The stuff is still there. The people are still around. It's just not the same because she's no longer there. When it comes to our children, sometimes our children, because we invest so much time in them, we forget to invest in our spouse. I want to make sure that I invest in her. She invests in me for the long haul on this thing. And we're not going to let the children be the chairman of the board. We're just not going to do that. We want to make sure that we invest in each other. Now, that doesn't mean we always do what I want to do. This last week, we did something that your mom wanted to do, and I keep looking at it, scratching my head, going, I have no idea why we're doing this. I'm not very talkative, and I'm just doing what I'm told. She said, you don't understand what we're doing. I said, no, I don't. But that doesn't mean anything. I said, it's kind of like we do a church function or I do something at work and said, here's what we're going to do. I'm like, I don't see it. I really don't see it. But I'm going to do it to accomplish the task that's laid before me. We cleaned out our garage. We took everything out of the garage. And we put everything back in the garage. I'm not sure exactly what the goal was, but we were able to throw away a couple things.
But no, it was in a different spot now.
But we put it in a new spot, and we have room because we're looking at moving, and we're loading up some stuff and packing up things. So I actually physically have more space to store stuff, and we did throw away some things that we need to get rid of. And she said, do you see it now? I said, sure. I mean, I personally, I would have just started throwing stuff away and moved it all around, and I think we would have come up the same way. However, we got accomplished what we need to be accomplished. But you know what I found out? She's very happy because that's been weighing heavy on her mind for weeks and weeks and weeks. Now she feels like that she can load up a box in the house and label it and put it out in the garage. So when we move it, it'll be easier to do. she doesn't want to leave it packed up in the house because when you show the house, you don't want all that clutter in there.
Right.
I understand all that. I didn't understand taking everything out and then putting it all back. And if you listen to this, sweetheart, you were right. But we're invested in it.
And not only that, one of the things that I think, and maybe we can get to some practical ideas, but like I said, it doesn't have to be anything big. That was not a big thing. You didn't spend $1 on it. All you did was spend time. Those are the two things you're going to spend, either time, money, or both. And you spent time on that. You got something accomplished, but something else you had was a shared experience. Sometimes all it takes is a shared experience. My wife and I are all the time laughing hysterically because there are life events that happen, and the two of us, we quote movies at each other that the kids have not seen because we saw them years ago, and it's like, yeah, it's not age appropriate or whatever. And but we saw them, when we were younger or whatever, and these situations arrive, and we respond with that movie or that quote or whatever. And we could be in public, and we could be just somewhere like a big event, and somebody says a phrase that reminds us of that. We could be across the room, and I'll catch her eye, and she'll catch mine, and we're trying not to laugh out loud. And the reason is because of shared experience. It's when we are riding in the car together, we're not listening to music. We're not listening to a podcast. We are talking to each other. And it's funny because she cannot keep her eyes open when we drive. Like, okay, let me say this. When I'm driving, when she's driving, she's fine.
Yeah, so far so good.
But like when we come to visit you guys or we come to visit her parents, it's about a 3.5 hour drive. And inevitably, about 30, 45 minutes in, she looks at me, no focus. She says, I'm sorry, I got to go to sleep. I'm like, it's fine. I'm going to be listening to podcasts and music while you're asleep. It's fine. And but a couple weeks ago, we were driving, and it was a little bit later in the day, and she wasn't tired, and we spent 2.5 hours talking, and it was wonderful. The trip went so much faster, and we were talking and joking, laughing, and just enjoying each other's company. And it made that trip an even more enjoyable experience because of that.
Yeah. Now, here's one, and we did this last week before last. It's fall of the year while we're recording. The leaves are beautiful, that sort of thing. And it was a Saturday, and trust me, I had plenty of things to do. I needed to unload the garage and turn around and put it all back in. All that needed to be done. But it was a Saturday. I said, I just want to get out. I want to do this because I know the leaves are going to be at their peak where we live. Let's go ahead and do this. And Sula said, okay, let's do it. I said, well, let's pack a lunch. So we took a picnic. Now, that's no money. It's stuff from the house. So we threw it in a cooler. We put it in the truck. And then off we went. I said, what direction you want to go? She gives directions. Halfway there, I'm going, are we in the right place? I don't know because I'm just following the directions. And we went to the middle of nowhere and turned left.
Yeah.
And we went into some roads that were, I'm glad we didn't meet anyone because both of us could not have passed together, but the leaves and the day was beautiful. The sun was shining on the leaves. The wind was blowing. I mean, just all those Hallmark movies that you're seeing in your mind right now. And we like to check the traffic ahead. We knew there was going to be a lot of people there because it was showing a lot of traffic. So we made sure then that we took another side road out of the middle of nowhere. And it came back around on a main road, and then we ended up at like a state park. They have picnic tables, and we pulled it at the picnic table and we sat down. And instead of sitting across from each other, which would be your norm, we snuggled in beside each other. Okay, now 45 plus years of marriage, and here this two old couple, these two people were snuggled in together. The wind is blowing. It's a little cool. It's crisp. Man, we have our picnic lunch and made some discoveries. And when we left, we drove back another direction that we hadn't gone and come back around. And what the cost was half a tank of gas all day long. And I'm telling you, both of us, our blood pressure was down. It was wonderful. And we have that experience. And even coming to this event that we're at today, one of the things that she said was, I'm so glad we went for that ride on that day because the leaves were at their peak. We caught it at the right time. That's not something she really wanted to do. Like I didn't want to necessarily do the garage, but you sacrifice to invest in your spouse. And when you do that, the dividends and the memories and all the stuff that you get that come back on the other side is absolutely wonderful. So it doesn't take a lot of money, but it does take time. It does take intentionality, and you always got to work on it. When I decided that we're going to start dating, and I told your mom that, I said, you and I are going to start dating. We are not going to be the statistic, and I'm not going to look at you across the table one morning at the breakfast table and go, I don't know who you are. We'd had too many friends do that. So we're not going to do that. We're going to start dating. And it was weird.
Yeah.
It was weird. You've been married 20 plus years. But listen, if it's worth having, if it's worth doing right or having it for the long haul, then it's worth investing in it. You hear us say about investing in and get the dividends back and everything. The memories we got, the stories that we have that we tell not only our son, our daughter, but our in-laws, and now we tell our grandchildren. And the oldest ones are 16, and they ask questions of now, because they're looking at dating and driving and stuff, and they've asked me these questions. Granddaddy, what did you and Grandma, where did you guys go? What did you guys do? And it's a safe environment versus asking mom and dad where
Right.
they feel a little guarded. And they ask us, what did you do? Where did you go? What did you guys talk about? So, well, here's kind of what we did. Oh, well, what'd you do this? Okay. And one of the things that we did, even when we were dating some 47 years ago, one of the things that we would do on Sunday evening is we would go to church. That's a given. After church, normally we'd go to her house, have a little snack or something, and inevitably, especially in the fall and the spring, we would end up on the front porch swing at her parents' house, both sitting on the same side, swinging, talking, looking at the sky, looking at the lightning, if it was the summer lightning, as we call it, way off in the distance, and looking at the cloud formations. And we talked about everything from love to marriage to children to discipline, to doing all kinds of things. Now, it must have been a big stinking deal because we can still talk about, do you remember when? And Sula will be right back on that front porch swing. We're talking, we're living it, and we've invested in each other so that the wife of my youth, who's no longer young, and I'm no longer young, we have so much together that we've invested in. We didn't let our kids be the ones to rule the roost. There were moments, I get that, but we didn't let that happen, and we made sure we invested in each other. So let me encourage anyone, if you're in a situation right now where the children are at home and you feel like all you're doing is being a taxi driver from one event to another event, doing this, doing that, doing the other, there are times where you feel like that, but make sure that you don't spend some time investing in your spouse in the long haul. Please make sure you do that. And we did another podcast on that. You can go back and listen to it as well. But I think that sometimes we got to make sure that we understand, even when you have small children at home or children at home, you still can invest in each other.
Yes, because like you said, you may feel like a taxi driver, or all you do is cook, all you do is clean, all you do is clean up, all that kind of stuff. It is a season. But your marriage is not a season. It is going to be seasoned if you let it be, right? So you again, like we said, you have to invest in your children, but not like your marriage. Your marriage is going to be forever. And your marriage is something that you chose. Children are something that come along. Yes, you choose to have your children. Yes, you choose. A lot of times it's how many and all that kind of thing. But your spouse is something that you chose, and you are choosing every single day.
That's right.
Because you can't remove your children, but we all too often remove a spouse because it's just too hard. I don't love them. I don't know who they are. And so we haven't invested the way that we should. So what we want you to do is take the time to, yes, of course you're raising your children, but even in those moments, and like we said, you may not be at a point where you can take a date every single week. We're not talking about dating your spouse. We're talking about investing in your spouse. That could be at home. That could be with the kids running around the room. How are you investing? How are you in the moment, in the presence with your spouse? Asking questions, talking, not just our conversations are all about the schedule or the meal, or, okay, I've got to be at this thing, you've got to be at that, this kid's got to be there. If that's all we're talking to each other, we're not investing. We're not asking the questions. If you've got to, look it up. What are some questions I can have? What are some conversation starters? Because sometimes, like you said, it's awkward. Maybe you need some conversation starters. Maybe that's something that you can write it down. Be like, man, what about this? What are some things? Because here's the thing. You still find out things you've never heard before. Dad told a story today about my grandfather I've never heard before. My grandfather's been, he passed away 4 years ago, and Dad's telling stories. We've always tell stories. That's what we do. He was telling a story I had never heard before in my life. That's what we're looking for, is look for those moments. I love it when I say something and I look at my wife and I'm like, I did not know that. And those are wonderful moments. And like we said, shared experiences, investing time, money if you can. But it's not about the amount. It's not about the amount of time. It's about the quality of that time that you spend together. And so, like we said, it's all about investing in your spouse and not to neglect the children. We'll talk about that at another time, of course. And we've talked about that some. But the whole point is you chose your spouse. Your spouse is the spouse of your youth. And you have always got to continue investing in that. So thanks for joining us today, and don't forget, we're with you, we're pulling for you, and we're all in this together.
Thanks for listening. Check out wewerethinking.org for more episodes, or drop us a note to info@wewerethinking.org.